Hello, everybody. We are live today talking about our mental health and wellness retreat for refugee women. This is really exciting time for us. We're starting a crowdfunding campaign, and today is the day that we're appealing to everyone out there to contribute what they can to this really incredibly important initiative. Nora's going to be joining me in a minute, and we're going to have a special guest join us as well, Shireen. She is a movement instructor, meditation instructor. We would maybe go as far as to say she is the guru we've always wanted in our lives. She is amazing. She has actually worked with us before in our previous mental health retreat for the women on our team in Jordan. And she will be doing that again for this upcoming retreat. So I'm going to bring Nora in now. Joining us from actually a market in Toronto. And I don't know if, is she there? Okay, there we go. Hi.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hey,
As you can
okay.
as you can see, I have like some house thing happening here. I'm at the holiday market at Square One, so don't mind the noise around me. I do apologize, but it's so great to join everybody today. Sorry, Jackie, I cut you off.
Oh, that's
Continue.
okay. I was just saying we're going to be joined by you, and then also Shireen will be joining us shortly. And if people aren't familiar with her, I was just giving a little bit of background on what she does and her relationship with City. She's been an incredible supporter of City for the past couple years and our women's mental health and wellness initiative. Um, she has also been a really big voice in the holistic health and wellness community in Jordan. So we're really fortunate to have her come and join us today. So she'll be joining us in a few minutes. Also, yeah, Nora is joining us from a market in the mall in Toronto. And so she might be coming in and out of the video depending on how good her connection is. Um, I just wanted to bring everybody's attention, though, to our mental health and wellness retreat. Um, it is a campaign we're currently running online right now. It's a crowdfunding campaign that we've been able to launch with iFund Women. And we're really excited about this opportunity to raise funds and bring awareness to this really important issue, especially today on Giving Tuesday. So just to give people a little bit of background on women's mental health in the refugee community, and a lot of people don't know this, but women present the highest rates of recorded PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, in the global refugee community today. And there's also a severe shortage of mental health professionals in Jordan as it is. So even for people who are Jordanian citizens who need access to mental health support, it's incredibly difficult for them to get that access. So what we're really trying to do is not just bring awareness to this issue, but also create accessible resources for our refugee team, in particular, the women on our team who are the primary or sole income earners for their families. So these are women who they have basically everything is kind of riding on them to make the household run and function. And that's a really stressful place to be in. So you can imagine that they're just experiencing constant stress and anxiety on a daily basis. And I think a lot of women out there who are also in this position, I think women who are mothers, women who are, maybe caregivers, or those who are trying to kind of keep up the household as a single mom, they definitely understand this feeling, where you are just the one who feels like, you feel like everything's riding on you. The COVID-19 pandemic really kind of became a moment for us as a team. And Nora, I don't know if you have a minute, if you want to talk a little bit about that and like how that impacted us. And then I'm going to check and Yeah, I'm gonna see if Shireen's joining us soon. But yeah, go ahead.
No, thank you so much for that. Also, if I do hop off suddenly, I think it's just my connection. I think I had a little bit of trouble earlier, so I apologize. Um, but yeah, I think mental health has has been a growing issue among so many people. I think what I will say this, that you know what's nice coming out of these conversations is that we are able to openly talk about this a lot more openly than we may have been able to like 5, 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And the fact that we have during COVID, we did lose a very important and special dear member in our team. Um, and we wonder like what would have happened, um, what would have happened like if they had the right support that we could have given them, for example. And it's something that we really want to um, highlight from basically from now on. So when we lost our team member, it was something where our other team members, our other community members had a very, very difficult time coming to work. They had a very difficult time showing up. And they expressed their stress and their anxiety of being able to come back. They felt, obviously very extremely sad for the loss of, a very dear community member who was like a sister to them. She was like, that aunt, that they would lean to. And she was just, she had the sweetest smile and she gave the best hugs and she was just, incredible. And we always ask ourselves, like, does our team have the kind of mental health support that we need, that they so deserve?
Right.
Um, and this is why we created this mental health initiative, is because we felt like, okay, we often talk about the resilience of refugees. We often talk about they can handle it. All we need to do is create jobs.
Yeah.
But what we don't realize is that, the job is just one element. They have so many different layers in their day to day. Like, I don't know if you guys, saw, I went to Jordan recently and it was a very heavy trip on me. I was telling, some people, my family members, I was like, it's a very, very heavy trip. Oftentimes, like, it's a reminder of like, this is how people live on a day to day basis. And for some of these refugees, they can't go home. They can't just be like, all right, I'm checked out. Like, I'm just coming to visit and leave. This is their day to day, right? They
Right.
can't just like check out. They can't just be like, I'm done here. And because we understand that, because we understand how difficult their day to day is, it puts this almost this, I don't want to say this pressure, but this like sense of responsibility of like, we have to do more. We have to expect more out of ourselves. And I think as Sitsi, we hold our standards quite high. If you guys know us,
Hmm.
we hold our standards very, very high, especially when we talk about impact transparency and the kind of things that we do. It's not just about, oh, I gave someone a one-off job. It's really about how is this person really truly coping? How is this entire household being impacted? Are there the other elements that we need to keep in consideration? Are they having issues with, security, with health issues that they may be facing? So these are things that we are often um, discussing. And I think it's part of our impact metric that we follow. We follow the self-reliance index that touches on 12 different indicators of, it's not just about the job. The job's one element, which is
Right.
fantastic. But creating self-reliance also to some component is ensuring that they're mental, like they're good to show up to work, right?
Right.
And that also means that we need to kind of help them understand how to cope with some of these measures. And I'm so, so excited that Shireen is joining us, because one of the greatest things that I remember, like the last live we did with her, she literally had like a 2-minute meditation with us. And I was like, my whole day was transformed.
Yeah.
But, but the women, I remember they were telling us, they were like, they were saying like, wow, I never knew that like breathing a certain way can help you reduce the stress. And that's something that we could, Shireen will talk about when she joins us as a guest right now, is really talking about how our mental state can be real, that we have a big opportunity to control that. The
Right.
way that we care for our bodies, the way that we care for our mental state, to a certain degree, it's almost like trainable, right? Like we have to train
Exactly.
our mind on how to cope, with difficult situations, knowing when your body has had enough,
Right.
knowing
And
when you
there's,
need to kind of take a step back. Yeah,
yeah,
go
and
ahead.
there's so much that we can't control, right? And I think that's also really important to recognize. There's so much in this world we cannot control. We cannot necessarily control how, we can't control how the refugee community in Jordan is treated all the time. We can't really control how policies are going to go in one direction or another, if they're going to be in favor of that community or not. But we do have control over ourselves, right? And we have control over our breath. We have control over our bodies and how we respond to those things that we can't control, right? So we have control over how we respond to the stressors in our daily lives. And I think what Shireen and also what the psychosocial support counselor helped our team understand is that there's so much out of our control in this world, but the one thing that you can take ownership of and really feel empowered by is yourself and how
Yeah.
you handle those situations. And you
And
can
I
really change your body's response to that.
100%. I was just speaking to a friend of mine and he was talking about how over the years, he's like, usually like I could handle it. I could go like, no breaks, like no vacation, like I'm a workaholic going overtime. And he's like, usually it's normal. He's like, but lately, like when I get sick, I'm like, I can't get up. And he's like, my burnout rate is a lot like shorter. It's harder for me. Hi, Shireen.
Hi.
It's a lot harder to recuperate from like burnout. And I think what people don't realize is they don't know when they get to burnout, but when they do, they think it's like, oh, I'll just rest for a day. And it's like some people I remember someone was saying like sometimes it takes months to recuperate from just like a burnout or like being able to come back and being like, okay, I'm mentally ready to come back or to function on a day-to-day basis. So I think like
Yeah.
understanding how to read your body and not getting to a point of absolute burnout where you're just like, oh wait, I have much more to repair than a day off of work, and kind of having to do that. But Shireen, we were just talking about coping with stress and understanding like how to deal with our mental state, knowing how to read our bodies when like things have gotten too difficult. But I mean, you're the special guest today, so I'm gonna leave it
I'm
all to
gonna
you.
I'm gonna take a quick opportunity again to introduce Shireen and then tell everybody why we're here today. So just so you remember, we are running a crowdfunding campaign for our women's mental health and wellness initiative, including the women's retreat that Shireen was a facilitator for last year and will hopefully be joining us again in the coming year for the next retreat. But it's really important that on today, Giving Tuesday, we're making a call out to people to contribute to our campaign. The link to the campaign is in our bio, in our link tree here on Instagram. We have an I Fund Women campaign up right now. That campaign does require you to just do a short login process in order to create an account and then contribute. There are some awesome rewards there, including a virtual class with Shireen. You get to go ahead and ask for a virtual class for you and up to 9 people. So if you have colleagues, if you have friends, if you want to take advantage of that reward, that is an awesome reward to go for. We also have some other lower tier
I want to
rewards.
win that one.
Yeah.
I want that one.
I know. I think we might have to go in on this. Like, we might have to all pitch in on this for City just to like have like for our Canada team. Maybe we should do this. Oh, we lost Nora. By the way, Shireen, Nora is joining us from a market in Toronto right now, so her connection's in and out a bit. But so I just wanted to give everybody a heads up. That link is in our link tree. Please contribute. Please look at those rewards and take advantage of that. We also have another campaign running. So we know that some people are in a rush sometimes to contribute, and it's not easy to just go on and create an account. If you want to access the Launch Good mental health and wellness retreat crowdfunding campaign page, this is an alternative page. It has the same rewards. There's nothing different about it. It's just that the login contribution process is a little faster. It's a little speedier. Excuse me, I just spit all over the place. It's a little speedier than our I Fund Women campaign. And if that's the case, if you're in a rush, head over to the Launch Good crowdfunding campaign. But they are the exact same thing, the exact same rewards. And please stay on, because we are also announcing a new reward today that's going to be exclusive to today's campaign for the next for the rest of Giving Tuesday. So Shireen, please, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about incorporating a daily practice of mindfulness into our routines. But also, I just like, please just spew your thoughts on today's conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jackie and Noura, for starting this lovely campaign and initiative. Um, I just really love this work, and I see how much it changes my own life and those around me and the students that come to the studio. And I'm just so happy that you're making this accessible for women that otherwise would have zero access to it. And I heard a bit of the conversation you were having before I hopped on. And mental wellness is like a really, it's like at the core of our being. You know, like if you have physical pain, that is valid. If you don't have money or food, that is valid. But then your mental, emotional well being, which is how you show up in every single day and what you're carrying with you ever since you showed up to this earth is not valid, like in most cases. And now it's starting to come to the light, and especially women, we tend to struggle more than men when when it has to do with our relationship with our bodies and emotions and just navigating life in general. Um, so yeah, coming into also the conversation about COVID and the loss of a loved one, it's whenever we go through something that is very sad and there's an extreme loss, it's just too big of an emotion for our bodies to handle. And that's why we start to suffer, and it shows up in different ways. Some people might start to have physical pain because emotional pain does turn into physical pain. Some people might just carry a lot of anger or a lot of grief or get depressed or just not in the mood to live anymore. Maybe numb out using addictions or food. Like it could show up and manifest in so many different ways. And sometimes the emotion is not processed enough, and we don't really get to have that closure and connect to how we really feel and have some sort of like meaningful, like create some meaning around the loss. And in order to be able to feel it, in order to be able to feel this big emotion, what needs to happen is we need to start building more capacity in our nervous systems. Because when we were kids, our nervous system was like so fragile, and that's why we had tantrums. We couldn't handle difficult emotions. We tend to grow older, but no one teaches us how to build capacity in our nervous systems. So we're just so fragile and easily activated. And when a difficult sensation comes over, we want to escape our bodies. We want to escape feeling this. So someone passes away, I do not want to feel this. I might go bury myself into work, but it's still there, it's stuck in my body, but I don't want to deal with it right now. And it keeps showing up, and it's never really connected to. So part of the work that I do is to get people to just start relating back into their bodies. I do not like I just work with people on just like noticing their bodies and building capacity with practice so that they can start dealing with different kinds of emotions. Now, bigger traumas like the loss of a loved one would need extra support from a therapist. But if they have a general, solid practice of just connecting and relating back to the self, that would also work hand in hand with any kind of other added therapy. So they can navigate life, or all of us can navigate life both in the small, like even joy needs capacity. You know, sometimes certain people, when they didn't experience joy in their lives, and the minute something happy is happening, they feel so uncomfortable and anxious. So it's about building capacity in our bodies to feel both
That's so
joy,
that is
sadness.
actually, I love that. I love that you mentioned that joy is also something that we need to learn how to accept. Like it's kind of like, you know, people that don't know how to take a compliment because they're not used to it, or they reach a point of success and they don't know how to sit there and celebrate it, and like just kind of like they're like, oh, okay, like
What's next?
this awkward of like, or this sense of guilt that you're joyful
Yeah.
because someone else might see it as the sense of like, oh, well, if I show that I'm too happy, then it shows that, you know, this, right? And I think sometimes, like, I see myself doing that sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, wait, I don't want to be too happy because something bad might happen, right? Like, because
Yeah.
we feel like if we are over joyful, if we are, you know, living our moments in a way that is in a way other people might look at that and be like, oh, well, look at her, she's so happy. And it's I think like in the social media world, when we're constantly sharing and everybody's putting a big smile on their face, that we often think that we're like, oh, this person's always, you know, they always got their stuff together, you know, they always know what they're doing, but really it's just we don't know what's happening kind of deep inside. But I thank you so much for mentioning that, because, you know, it's like you said, it's knowing how to deal with, you know, grief and loss and sadness, but also knowing how to deal when we're just okay and we can celebrate and be joyful and be happy. And like, I think it's the navigation of those emotions. One thing I wanted to ask you is, I know that like maybe more so in like the Middle East, particularly in these like vulnerable communities where like therapy isn't something common that you talk about, right? Like, you know, this thing of like, let's go, you like, I need to go to therapy. Walk us a little bit through your experience and through, you know, the things that you do, because, you know, we've seen different forms of therapy. They're not all sitting with a doctor, right? Because therapy can mean very different things. It could be like physical movement therapy. It could be, you know, different elements that could be incorporated in your day-to-day that doesn't necessarily just be a psychologist, for example. So maybe can you touch on that and why it's important to maybe find the right one that makes sense for you, or maybe find a combination that makes sense for you?
And I want to add to that actually, because I want to also ask you, Shireen, if you can talk about your personal experience, if you're willing to share that, you know, working in the field you're in a community where, yeah, like mental health and wellness is still a new topic in a lot of ways. It's still like mental health therapy, those types of things are still relatively new in the conversation socially. So if you could also like touch on that and then address what Nora had talked about, like what are the other options and what are all the different ways you can go about that healing process?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, such a heavy and dense
Sorry, I know you're only supposed to be here.
conversation.
You're only
No,
supposed
no,
to be
it's
here
okay.
for 15 minutes. So if
I'm
you
like,
need to
where do
cut
I
us
start?
off.
Where do I start? No, no, it's fine. I would love to talk about this. So I feel like, yeah, like in this part of the world, especially for, I would say, my parents' generation and their parents, for them, mental health is more of a taboo, and it's more of like you need to be like borderline, like diagnosed that you're like something's really, really wrong with you, so that you go into therapy or into psychotherapy or into healing. And but I feel like my generation, especially women, they are paying so much attention to their mental health, and they are aware of how necessary it is, um, because at the end of the day we all experience trauma on some level or another, all of us. And even if we are completely like trauma free, we are relational social beings. So in our everyday life, we are engaging with people who are traumatized, and that trauma is in our, you know, energy field. I guess you know, everything comes when there's a strong need to it. So the more sensitive you are and the more fragile your nervous system is, I feel like the more you will feel like you need to start building awareness and, you know, exploring different modalities of healing. And that was the case for me. So I come from a family where I feel like a lot of, you know, family members would really benefit from some form of therapy or some form of like emotional release, but for them it's a taboo. And I realized early on that I was quite sensitive to everything happening around me, sensitive to life, to nature, to interactions, to art, to my work. And like my emotions were were so extremely heightened that my body could not handle them. It couldn't contain them. The good, the bad, the confusing, everything was too much, too overwhelming. And that's why I would say around 2018, I started to feel I was 27, 28. And that's the age where you start to kind of really shift and like transition in life. It's like big transitions mostly happen around that age. That's where I realized like, okay, I was a highly functioning, highly achieving person, but at the same time, I would have those moments of overwhelm and collapse and very intense emotional, sessions, and something felt off. There was a disconnect. And that's when I started to work at the Inner Life Institute with Aisha Tanhouni. She's a body and play-based therapist. And I started to explore different modalities of healing. And I started to incorporate that into the movement practice that I teach. And I also went into holistic health coaching. So that's a bit of that. I feel like answers Jackie's question about in the region. So it's still a bit of a
thank
taboo,
you.
but I feel like we're breaking it with our generation.
Yeah.
As for Noura, there are so many endless, yani, it's a wide, it's like pretty late right now. My brain stops functioning, but like it's a
wide world.
Wide. Yeah, it's a wide world in like therapy world, and like some of the modalities that I am familiar with, I can share. So I really like something that works really well for me is any kind of somatic approach, which approaches the somatic body and the nervous system. So you come out of the mind, out of like sticking to the story, and you start to see how the sensation is moving in your body, and you really, really connect to the feeling, and you start to regulate with the nervous system. Another approach would be internal family system, which addresses the person as having multiple parts. And whenever a certain strong, we're dealing with something specific, there's a part of us that got birthed along the way since we were children to protect our most vulnerable core. So there's a part that might be a protector and be really rigid and want to protect us. Another part that is always afraid of being abandoned. It just like deals with all of those different parts and how they relate to the true self. I also really resonate with this modality. And then there are just other more cognitive approaches, behavioral therapy, more of like talk. There are other ones that are more about how to reprogram your mind and your thoughts, because your thoughts engage emotion. And there are other modalities of like art therapy, where you express emotion through drawing and making things. There's play therapy. It's usually used for kids, but also maybe for adults. So those are a few that I could think of now, but definitely if someone feels like they need or are feeling like, I remember feeling hungry to know myself better and to feel better and to connect better. And once you feel that, the resources are endless, right? Like there are so many books to read, podcasts, lectures, stuff online, centers. And I'm happy for anyone to also reach out to the Inner Life Institute. I can put them in touch with Aisha.
We can also add, we'll tag Inner Life Institute on our Instagram page as well. And I think that you touched on something really important too, which I think a lot of people get really scared about, like exploring their inner selves, and they start to, I think that's really part of it, is like that's part of the reason why there's so much taboo around the topic, not just I think in cultures, whether it's in Jordan or throughout the Middle East, but globally, this is still a taboo topic in a lot of different communities, even here in the US. And people are afraid, right? They're afraid of what they're going to find out. But once you do start to dig and really explore yourself, it actually becomes a really exciting journey, right? Like it becomes this opportunity to really understand, okay, why do I have these habits, or why do I have these tendencies? Like, you start to really understand where it's coming from, instead of just, I think, whether it's like you were saying, whether it's having difficulty experiencing joy or having difficulty experiencing pain and loss, you start to not just find ways of dealing with that grief or dealing with that joy, but also understanding, why did I have such a hard time in the first place experiencing that joy, and addressing those root causes. So yeah, there's definitely, I think I've experienced this in my personal life. I mean, Nora can speak to her own, personal experiences, but I definitely have had a really hard time experiencing joy, right? So it's that, and grief. Like, so when something really traumatic happens or something really exciting happens, I go straight to work. Like,
Exactly.
I have always had a really hard time just sitting in the moment
Yeah.
and processing. And so
Yeah.
work was always, and I'm still working on this. Work has always
Mhm.
been my thing, where it's like, push it down, keep working, work 10 hours, work 12 hours a day, just like find something else to do. um but
And this is how your body
yeah,
is regulating. Like this is how
yeah,
your body is regulating, because whenever something difficult happens, there's this dysregulation in the system, and people have different coping mechanisms. And for some, it's like work. For others, it's like food. For others, it's other sorts of addictions. It's whatever would, like you said, get you distracted or numb you away from the
mm,
feeling. Because that's our natural response. We want to push away what feels difficult. We don't want to feel it in order to survive. But then we sit with the discomfort is still bottled up inside of us.
right,
And it's very true what you said about like the scary part, and like you don't want to face it. It literally is like opening the Pandora box. Like
yeah.
I remember at the beginning, I dreaded having to face some of my patterns, or like the way I was showing up or behaving. But I've never fallen into true love with my being as I did after I walked that path. And it was also very humbling, especially if you're like someone who's overachieving. You're so used to like getting all of that external kind of affirmation, and like, but deep inside you're not really happy with yourself, and there's this whole like, you think you're like doing it right life, but deep inside something feels off. So when you start doing all of that work, whatever happens on the outside, whether it's positive, negative, like the feedback,
Yeah.
it's like it matters more what's happening within you, your intention, and how you're relating to yourself. And just picking up on those patterns, like, oh, I'm working right now, but I'm really, really sad.
Hmm.
So can I just be with that sadness and tend to myself? Like, what do I need right now in this sadness?
Shireen, you mentioned something really important, which is like, as children, they express themselves by having a tantrum. I have 3 kids that are always having tantrums on a daily. But it's something that me and my husband try to do is like, if they're like screaming or sad, they're like, okay, it's okay to be sad. Like, and I remember we were at the dinner table, and I guess because my daughter hears it at daycare. So one of my older kids got annoyed about something, and she was very upset. And then my little 3-year-old literally looked at her and she's like, it's okay to be sad. You can be
Oh,
sad. And I looked at
that's
my
so
three, like
beautiful.
Mariam, my 3-year-old, and I was like, did she just say that? Like, was she like a
Oh,
little wiser than myself? Like, I was just like,
oh, yeah.
I was like, yeah, you're right. It is okay to be sad. Like, and I think
Right.
sometimes as parents, we often want to feel like we have our kids under control, or, there's
Yeah.
so many times, if you've ever seen me at a grocery store with a crying child because they didn't get what they wanted, sometimes you're like, all right, if you're gonna cry, you're gonna cry. You're gonna throw that tantrum, but like you're gonna have to learn. I think because we're so used to society telling us to like control, like, oh, make sure that they're quiet or make sure this. And sometimes like if they're gonna scream, like that's just their way of expressing themselves. And I think I don't remember growing up, you know, with the sense of like it's okay to like have a tantrum. And I
Yeah.
think as parents, I think I'm more like, as a parent, I'm very conscious of like, you know, I see my kids going literally through so many different emotions in like less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, how do you deal with that? Sometimes it angers me. Sometimes I get mad at my
Yeah.
daughter and I'm like, you need to control your emotion. And then I'm like, why am I so, and I think about it, I'm like, why am I so like rough on her, like having to get her emotion? She's 7. Like she doesn't know how to control her. And I think because for to a certain
Yeah.
degree, like we see ourselves through our children and we're like, well, no, you have to really, you know, regulate your emotion because then it's like a representation of me that I'm not a good parent because you don't know how to have your, you know, have yourself in order. So I think it's a constant, like it's a learning process. It's very
Yeah.
hard. But I think you
Absolutely.
mentioning that, like just recognizing it and just accepting it. And I think there was one thing I heard from like Gabor Mate when it was like, well, when your children throw a tantrum, and I know we're going off tangent a little, but when your children, for example, like have a tantrum and you're like, go to your room, you know, come back out when you're good. He talks about like what you're the signal you're giving out to your child is that you're only okay with them when they're happy.
Yeah,
You're only
exactly.
willing to accept them when they are smiling. It's kind of like the friend that you'll only talk to when they're good to you. You're not willing to accept like criticism or like, you know, like if you're a true friend, you'll hear the good and the bad.
Well, and I don't
Right?
think this is going off. I actually, I mean, I wouldn't say it's going off topic, or because it then translates to adulthood, right? And
Yeah.
that
But
is, we
also then,
carry
like,
those.
are we
Yeah,
accepting people even in their bad days? Because are we saying, go to your room? I don't want to deal with you when you're having a bad day. Come back to me when you're ready. That's
yeah,
what we're doing, right? And
Yeah.
and I remember when I heard that, it was so profound for me. I was like, oh wow, because I've done that a couple of times. I think, like, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know what, go to
Yeah.
your room when you're ready. Come back to me. And
Yeah.
then what I realized, I'm actually telling them, I'm not accepting you as who you
Yeah.
are when you're angry or when you're upset or when you're sad. I'm only going to interact with you when you are good and, you know, a
Yeah.
disciplined child. And like, what does that say about us? Like, that we can't accept people when they're not having a good day. It's like, okay, well, go home when you're ready to have a good day, come back. Well,
Yeah.
what if I can't get back to that good day? Right? So
Yeah.
well, and I mean, I think and Shireen, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on like, how do you feel? Because there are obviously certain behaviors that we do as adults where, oh, I think Nora will rejoin us in a
Yeah.
second. There are certain behaviors we have as adults that do upset other adults around us, right? And so
Exactly.
we have to also establish our own boundaries and be able to identify like, okay, this person's having a bad day. That's fine for them. Like that's what they need to do, but maybe it's not good for me, right? And
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
like I also need to say, okay, have your bad day. I'm going to remove myself from the situation because
Exactly.
I know this isn't good for me. I'm not
Yeah.
telling you like you can't have
Yeah.
your tantrum or your emotional,
Yeah.
experience, but this is my boundary. So
Yeah.
maybe talk a little bit about how do boundaries play a role in our well-being and our like and kind of being able to go within our body and identify what's good for us and what's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like a beautiful like path. The conversation is taking such a nice path. I just want to go like stay in order in my mental thoughts back to what Nuda was saying, and then end at boundaries, because it was really nice what you mentioned about uh, allowing your children to take up space and for their emotions to take up space. Like we need that. Like this is brilliant what you're doing. Um, and also the fact that you're sitting there with them while they have it, their fragile nervous, small nervous system starts to co-regulate with your bigger, calm nervous system. And that what gives them safety, and that's what allows them to feel it, and then it metabolizes and passes. And that's how they start to grow, and they can have bigger capacities, so they grow up being healthier adults, as opposed to someone that had to like stuff down their emotions or was punished for having a certain difficult feeling. Now moving on to like sometimes just like doing that thing of like asking your child to go in the room, that also speaks to your own capacity in that moment. And that leads us to what Jackie was saying about boundaries. Even like Jackie was saying, when relating with adults, You might find yourself either in dynamics where you are even overgiving to that person that is chronically sad or chronically needing, and that's also a pattern. So am I addicted to joining people on their suffering, or am I losing myself holding their suffering? You know, so it's a very like delicate dance of like sometimes I used to expect that my partner or my best friend should always be there in all of my, you know, dysregulations. And sometimes they are, or even my mom or my dad, like whoever is close to us, and they would show up, but sometimes maybe not the way I wanted or with the intensity I needed in that moment. And then I would be like, oh, they do not love me. But then when I, you know, when you do the work, when you sit with yourself, you notice that, oh, their capacity is also limited. They're human. And we're just like learning this dance. So how can I start to regulate within myself? How can I build that safety in my own body? And that's where the movement element comes in, where we practice, you know, Pilates, yoga, we walk in nature, we learn how to do grounding breath work, we eat in a healthy way, we sleep enough. Like if you don't get good sleep, no one can save you. Unless you're dysregulated the whole day. Nothing anyone around you could do could make you feel better. So how can I take care of myself, learn all of the tools that can help me regulate, and then how can I start to also do the work to learn how to support myself, especially when it gets really difficult and I'm triggered. And then how can I start to build communities that are of people that are doing the same work, that can support me in the proper way, where they understand their boundaries. They will be supporting me enough where I do not become codependent. At the same time, they show up, they hold space, and they allow me to co-regulate with them.
I love the boundary issue because it also talks about being conscious of the environments that we put ourselves in. I mean, I guarantee anybody watching, you know, one or two of your friends that are probably ones you should not be hanging out with, because you leave that room feeling depleted, feeling like your energy is down, feeling negative. And sometimes I think being conscious about like just the people that we surround ourselves with, like, you know, we talk about, you know, it's not this thing where I went to one yoga session, I'm all good to go, or like I went to one therapy session. It's really this, like you said, you need to sleep right, you need to eat right, you need to, like, you know, there's so many different elements that we have to consider, but also your environment, your external environment is a big one. And that, like, not everybody should be, you know, welcomed. That there are people in your life that are actually bad for your mental state. They could be maybe inhibiting addictive qualities or like of you that you should try to like avoid, for example. Or they bring out like certain parts of you that like normally, you know, that like you come to regret later, for example. So I think it's just being also conscious of that and being in an environment that is kind of accepting it. I think the conversation about spouse is really important because it's a fluid type of relationship. It's not something that's like it's always one thing. I know me and my husband always go back and forth on this. I remember when we first got married, he was like, he was big on this, as like, you know, don't rely on me 100%. I mean, he's a very religious guy. He's a very religious man. And so for him, he was like, if you're going to rely on me, I'm human, I'm going to err, and I'm going to disappoint you. But if you're going to rely on a higher being, like for us, like, you know, rely on Allah, rely on God, like he'll never disappoint you. But like, if you rely on any person, me, your mother, your sister, your best friend, something's always going to happen where they're bound to disappoint you. And I think when we put our reliance on, you know, rely on ourselves, rely on whatever, if you believe in a higher being, if you believe on, you know, in God, like, you know, I think that goes a long way to kind of help people because, you know, like you said, we have to like learn how to navigate with ourselves before we expect it of others, right? Like it's kind of like, and I think if you're expecting it solely of your spouse, you're gonna get disappointed. Like they might show up a couple of times, but they have their own threshold, right? Like even, I mean, this conversation of like boundaries, like even as a parent, when I want to be there for my kids, but there's times where I'm like, I can't even have them touch me. I'm like, please guys, like I've reached my capacity of don't even, like, please go to bed. Like nobody touch me, nobody come near me. Don't like, I need my space. I need to breathe. Like, and I think sometimes we get to that level of like, I just want to be in my bubble under my sheet. Like, I don't want anybody, like, I don't want any
Right.
interaction. And I think the sense of boundary can happen, you know, not just with our spouses, our friends, our work, you know, our kids, like it happens with ourselves, like knowing when, like, okay, I'm done. I got to close the shop and I got to.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love everything. Like, I love where this conversation is going. I usually, for me in my own personal life, like that's what does it for me. Like when it feels like too much, and I kind of, there's this moment where it's just like too much to handle, too much to feel, and that's where I just surrender it to Allah. Like there's no other way, and somehow things start to flow from there. And I also incorporate all of the healing tools because I also want to gain meaning. And like when I was younger and I didn't have those tools, I would pray, I would cry. Eventually, you know, like I would go through the whole motions, but I would not integrate afterwards. You know, it would just be this like very difficult experience, emotional experience, and I would not, you know, like integrate or learn or give meaning or grow out of it. And it would be too intense and I would not know how to support myself through it. So even for people who are practicing like different religions, that whoever, like whatever kind of spiritual element you have, which is very important for each human being, so you can rely on a higher power, having those tools will also even enhance that connection and will help you, you know, navigate the whole situation better.
I think
want to,
Whether it's like, yeah,
especially because like, and I can just imagine like in the refugee camp and even in the Middle East, it's common to be like, you know, if someone's sad, just, you know, just pray, you'll be fine.
exactly.
Right? Or this sense
Yeah.
of like, you know, just make dua, you know, and then you'll be
Exactly.
fine. And it's like, sometimes it's like not to say not to do that, but also saying like, there's other ways that that even like religiously or spiritually, some people are not taught the navigation of it. Like
Exactly.
that's, it's one element, it's one layer.
Yeah.
But I think for these communities, I think that's this like very thin line of like, you know, what does it really mean? Like I was talking to some, they're like, oh, is this like this sense of like, oh, if you're going to a community that's already very conservative and you're saying, okay, let's do some yoga. I'm like, it's not about the yoga. It's really about knowing how to deal with your body, knowing how
and how to integrate that. And, you know, it's the yoga is a tool that you're being taught how to use.
Exactly.
And how do you now take that tool and integrate it into your daily life and daily practice? I want to just pause really quickly and let everybody who is on the call know that we are running today for Giving Tuesday. We're bringing everybody's attention to City's Mental Health and Wellness Initiative. This is something that we're running a crowdfunding campaign for right now. You can access the link to that campaign and contribute whatever amount you can. You can contribute $5, you can contribute $500. There are some amazing rewards over there for you. And we're focusing this conversation today on women's mental health, but also mental health in the refugee community in general, and the discussions around those themes. Shireen Khamis is joining us today. She's actually joined us way longer than she.
Sophia just joined us. Hi, Sophia. If you're still
Hi,
say
Sophia.
hi in the chat.
Oh yeah, Sophia
Hi,
is
Sophia.
here, our other co-founder. And, you know, Shireen Khamis is an amazing movement instructor and holistic wellness teacher in Jordan. She has worked with our team in Jordan before and hopefully will continue to with this next retreat that we're raising funds for at the moment. So if you can contribute, check out our link tree. The link is over there. We have 2 campaigns running. One is with iFund Women. There's a short process where you have to create a profile on iFund Women. It's pretty short. You can do it in a few minutes, but if that's too cumbersome for you, we're also going to be creating a Launch Good platform page where you can contribute, and there's a slightly faster process for contributing to that. Rewards are completely the same. There's no difference.
Those links on our Instagram.
Yeah, we'll have them put up on Linktree. One of them is already up there, so please check it out. We have a few minutes left in today's conversation. I do want to hit on a quick comment we got from Juliana. Juliana is also our communications designer. She's amazing. And she asked, what happens when you live somewhere that you don't have control over living in, such as a refugee camp? How do you deal with the external influences that, and I imagine she's talking about the stresses that really you have no control over, you know, the fact that there are certain policies in place or what have you, that you just really can't control how limiting they are in your life and how stressful they are. So I think this goes to Shireen, if, you know, it goes back to what you were talking about earlier is, what kind of sensations are present in my body right now? So how can we deal with these external influences and go inwards and kind of heal from the inside out?
Yeah. Well, before going internally, when we're speaking about the external environment, it really helps to do a simple exercise of just writing down everything that is creating pain or suffering that you can control, and then another list of what you cannot control. Because a lot of the time, there are like just so many things piled up on top of each other. And some of them we actually do have choice in, but we're just so overwhelmed in that bubble, and we're just like, I'm not even living where I want to be living, and we just like completely give up on the whole thing, or we feel frustrated or overwhelmed. So just a simple exercise of all of the fears or all of the obstacles that I have control over, and everything I do not have control over. And then going into the things that I do not have control over, and just like really sitting with them, being with them, and seeing which ones you can just really surrender and let go, and which ones you can potentially change. So like, even if you go really, really deep into that exercise, almost all of us will at the end also have death on that list, which is something that we cannot escape. So there are certain things that all of us in this human experience will have to face one way or another. And it's about just sitting and trying to, not on the spot, this will not happen like in that moment, but just like sitting with the thing and being like, oh, like, can I accept this? Or can I release this? And just noticing the sensation in the body. And then just again, so maybe now you know this is it. This is what's really bothering me. So every time when I feel uncomfortable, I sit with this thing, and can I surrender it? Can I let go of it? Can I connect to a higher power? And you find your own process. And then you go into the list of the things that you actually have choice with, which is like choosing to wake up in a magical moment in the day when the sun rises. The sun rises everywhere. And just noticing 5 magical things your eyes can see, or like 4 things or 3 things you can hear, or something you can taste, or 2 things you can smell, like small instances of being in the body and tapping into pleasure and joy. Those all of us, we have choice over.
I
You know
really,
that
really,
there was
really
this,
love that.
yeah.
Because
And I
sometimes
also,
there's this sense of like, sorry to cut you off, but sometimes there's this sense of like, it's not my fault. Like, you know, it's I'm put in this situation, or, you know, I was born into this, or, you know, this is, you know, it's, some people are just, for example, some people are just born rich. Some people are just born this. Some people are just born that. And I have all these layers. But what you're saying is, what can you control? What can you change? What you have, this sense of like, you know, all right, the situation might be very difficult, but what can I change in my day to day? You know, like just the notion of like waking up with a different state, right? You know, what we put in our bodies. Like some people are like, well, it's not my fault. I have whatever it is. It's like, well, what are you putting in your body? What are you feeding your body that's going to help you feel better about yourself? And sometimes I think we resort to this like blame game. And what you're talking about is really like taking ownership
exactly.
of what we can and cannot do. But yeah, go on, please.
Yeah. And also, like, just hearing you say, like, some people are born rich and privileged, other people are born, you know, but just from my humble experience of dealing with a wide spectrum of people, like, and like going into like deep connections and conversations, and at the root of it, we're all human. We all go through the same emotions, the same experiences, whether you're a woman at the camp or the Queen of England. We go through the same emotions as human beings. We all have to deal with death, the loss of a loved one, the feeling of abandonment, of rejection, the loneliness, the anxiety, like we all go through it. Our situations, our environments, our stories are different, but the experience of being human is one. And that's what like connects us all, and that's what helps us just relate to each other's suffering, because we felt it. Like we felt the loss of a loved one. We know how it's like. And that's where community comes in. That's why it's not just about the movement or the yoga or the Pilates. It's also about the building the community of different people or different women coming together, wanting a deeper connection, wanting to feel, wanting to be present, wanting to be intentional, and like you said, taking ownership of their lives and coming together and doing it together, so they can start to collectively heal and grow and support each other on the way, because we also co-regulate as a group. It's much easier, you know, like let's imagine the loss of a loved one, like holding or carrying a very heavy, like 20-kilo bucket. Imagine if like 20 women were carrying the same bucket. Like it would be much more doable, because there's the capacity of the 20 people in the group. And that's what we do when we heal or we move or we do whatever kind of work in a community. It's all of our bodies holding the sensation, so it
Right.
becomes more bearable.
That is
Right.
just, I just got like the visual of just holding that heaviness that is in everybody's heart when when it comes together collectively as a community, like how much we feel like we can lean on each other to a certain degree. Like everybody has a different sense of like this ability to hold within them different, like everybody's a different barrel, right? Like everybody can hold different.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I think it's just that it's very immense. I think, you know, and like you said, it's not just when we're dealing with grief, it's really when we are connected as a community, we do feel the sense of, you know, this responsibility within each other. Like how
Right.
can we support each other? How can we, you know, create pillars within the community itself so that it grounds us, that we feel the sense of connection, so that when someone is maybe drowning, we recognize that, we see it, and we're able to say like, okay, you know, it's kind of like this sense of intervention coming in, saying like, you don't feel right, you don't look, you look like you need a little bit more support, for example.
Well, and I
um
think we set ourselves up to be able to help those we love and care for in our community when we do take care of ourselves, right? And
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
it sounds very simple, but it is
Yeah.
often something we forget to do as adults and
Yeah.
especially as women. And I think that's really what this you know, mental health initiative for us is all about. That's what this campaign is about for us. It's about people recognizing that there's a real sense of, you know, filling your own cup. There's a real importance of filling your own cup in order to fill others and in order to support others in your life who you love and care for. And our team members are so often the women in their communities and their families who are constantly, you know, supporting others, constantly taking care of their families. They're the primary breadwinners. They're the ones taking care of their husbands who might have chronic illness, and their children. And so that often ends up leaving them depleted. So, you know, again, just kind of bringing it full circle. This is about really giving them the tools, like you had mentioned, whether it's yoga, whether it's breathing, like breath work, whether it's therapy, talk therapy, giving them those tools to then incorporate things into their daily practice, into their daily life, so that they can take control of the things that they can control and then go ahead about their day and help the other people in their community who are relying on them. I know we're running out of time, so I just want to end this by saying thank you so much, Shireen. You've stayed with us well beyond
I honestly could
what
do
we had
another
asked you
hour.
to.
I honestly could do another hour with you. Like, I don't even want to hang up. I'm sorry I keep coming in and out, but I honestly, we can never have enough of you. Like, you're sharing so many like jewels with us, just so much information that I'm like literally jotting it down. I'm like, this is just such good takeaways to kind of really, when we're talking about this issue, that it's not just about, yeah, I mean, it's another reminder why we should invest into our, you know, why investing into mental health goes a really long way, not just for one person, but like an entire community, and that how it can really, really help even navigate. Because sometimes people feel like, you know, these refugees probably need more than just mental health. They have bigger issues to worry about. I'm like, yeah, well, dealing with their mental health is going to help them navigate with the bigger issues that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's something that it's a reminder for us that, like, it's like we mentioned this in the call earlier, that, you know, there are kind of conversations around, well, there's probably emergency services that are more priority. But I think today's conversation was an indication, was a reminder that you need to be in a good state to be able to have that full cup, so that you can show up better, you know, as a mother, as a daughter, as a community member, as a wife, and just as for yourself too, and just being able to say, like, I can stand on my 2 feet and be able to kind of cope and stuff. So I want to thank you so much, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have this. And I know when we mentioned to the women that we're going to be doing the retreat, they're like, Shireen's going to be there, and we're like, yep. 100%, inshallah. But it's so exciting because they had so many positive takeaways that I think this was one of the first times that they can actually focus on themselves in a different way than normal, right? And I think that's a really, really important part. So I know we have gone a little bit over time. I don't know how we want to end this session. I think, Juliana, I can feel this meditation session will be great after this beautiful session. I think, are you asking for a meditation session, Juliana? I would think, are we doing a meditation session? I'm not sure. Right after? I'm not sure if we are.
I think we're just about out of time. I want to make sure we don't get cut off. I thank you again, Shireen, for everything. Thank you to all our supporters so far. I want to give a big shout out to our supporters of our campaign thus far. Natasha Friedis, Miri, Sabrina, Fiona, Mike and Shar, Vinny, Michelle, an anonymous supporter. We've had some really fantastic supporters in the campaign so far. Please join them. The link is in our link tree. Today is Giving Tuesday, so this is a great opportunity to do that. We also have an exclusive reward coming out today that will be a bundle exclusive for the campaign. It'll include some amazing City products. Shireen has an awesome reward up on the campaign right now with a virtual class for you and 9 other friends or colleagues. So again, thank you so much, Shireen. You can follow Shireen, by the way. Shireen Khamis is on Instagram. Her link is, or her I don't know what you call it, her handle. You have the excuse of it being the end of the day, Shireen. I don't. So her handle is up on our chat here, but we'll also put it in the Instagram post. Yeah, so thank you, Nora, so much for joining us. I know you're at the market right now. If anybody's in Toronto, check out.
Please.
Yeah.
Can I give you a quick tour? I know this is like impromptu, so I'm going to give you a quick tour. So I'm actually at the holiday market at Square One. This is our booth. This is where I was like sitting right here. Come check it out. It's a little market. You can get all your holiday shopping. I'm right across H&M. This is not an advertisement for H&M, but come here, come to our booth, check out our beautiful little gifts that you can grab on the go for your family and friends. And if you're here, you can come by, say hi to me, have a little chat. And yes, I know some of you don't live in this country. So for those that do live in Canada, live close to Mississauga, please pass by our market. I'd love to have a conversation with you and just say hello to everybody in the community. Again, thank you everyone that has supported. Shireen, your time is just, you've given us so much already. And I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you, girls. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.